Hello and welcome to Uncovering Our Hidden History. My name is Anna. I'm a genealogist as well as a historical researcher. And I started this channel to be able to share with you all of the hidden history and the history that we've been lied to about. And so happy that you've joined me. And in today's video, we are going to pick up where we left off with Dr. John Coleman's hierarchy of the Committee of 300, and we're going to finish going through those slides, and then we're going to be talking about some other things near the end. So we have a lot to go over, so I'll see you in just a couple minutes. extremely powerful leaders of corporate business on a global scale. And so the doors to ultimate power were opened to what the Queen of England likes to refer to as the commoners. So again, this is our power structure pyramid. We see the eye of Lucifer at the top, and then underneath that says the world monarch, which was Queen Elizabeth II, and now most likely is King Charles. And as I mentioned last week, it does make us wonder what President Donald Trump is really up to over in England right now, meeting with Charles and Camilla and all of that. Everything we see is, looks innocuous. It looks, friendly, like there's nothing going on, just pomp and circumstance. But there's something underlying that visit. And one thing, as I was doing a little reading, I didn't realize was that every world leader that has ever been invited to Buckingham Palace, they've only been invited one time. President Trump is, as far as I can tell, as far as I could see, he is the only leader that has ever been invited twice. So I don't know. I think there's more to meet the eye there. So for those of you who have the time, how about doing some digging and see what you can come up with on your end? Okay. We also have this web. I like to think of the Committee of 300 kind of like an octopus, like Hydra, right? And then all of these different groups and subgroups are like the tentacles. And so, and I want to mention, as I did last week, please take screenshots of all of these slides so that you have them for your own research and to share with other people when you try to explain to the people in your sphere of influence. You are more than welcome to take screenshots of any of these. Okay, so the whole agenda of all of those bloodline families, of all of those groups, is a new world order. Okay, America especially, well, none of us are anymore under the old world order. We are most definitely under the new world order, and the Third World War is definitely in play and has been in play probably since, at least I'm thinking, the 1970s or the 1980s. Okay, so let's continue on with Dr. John Coleman's The Story of the Committee of 300, the Conspirators Hierarchy. All right, so I apologize. I'm going to have to pull this over so I can read it. He says, all information that I provide in this book comes from years of research backed up by impeccable intelligence resources. Nothing is exaggerated. And just to remind you guys, I should probably say this. If you are brand new to this video, please go back to the channel playlist and start from the very beginning. Start from the first video in the 3 World Wars series and watch all of those so that this makes sense. Or at the very least, go watch last week's video, part 3C, so that this week makes sense. But Dr. John Coleman was, I believe he was a British intelligence officer that, while stationed in Angola in West Africa, stumbled across some classified information, and that started him digging. And that's all of this information from this book comes from years and years of his research. And he wrote a book in about 1991 called The Conspirators Hierarchy, which was published about 1993. And so that's where, he's been at this a while, and he had access to documents that most normal people don't. And so all of this information in this book comes from all those years of his research. Okay, so he says, nothing is exaggerated. It is factual and precise. So do not fall into the trap set by the enemy that this material is disinformation or conspiracy theory. For the past 2 decades, slide that back. For the past 2 decades, he says, I have provided information which has proved to be highly accurate and which has explained a lot of puzzling events. My hope is that through this book, a better, clearer, and wider understanding of the conspiratorial forces ranged against this nation will come about. The hope is being realized as more and more young people are beginning to ask questions and seek information about what is really going on. It is difficult for people to comprehend that these conspirators are real and that they have the power I and many others have attributed to them. Many have written to ask, how is it that our government does nothing about the terrible threat to civilization? Well, the problem is that our government is part of the problem. It's part of the government is part of the conspiracy. Every government of every nation is part of the problem and part of the conspiracy. And nowhere and at no time has this become more clearly evident than during the Bush presidency. And he's referring to Bush Sr. Of course, President Bush Sr. knows precisely what the Committee of 300 is doing to us, because he works for them. Others have written to say, we thought we were fighting the government. Well, of course we are. But behind the government stands a force so powerful and all-encompassing that intelligence agencies are even afraid to mention the name of Olympians. There is not one single aspect of life in America that is not watched over, steered in the right direction, manipulated and controlled by the invisible government of the Committee of 300. There is not one elected official or political leader that is not subject to its rule. No one thus far has got away with defying our secret rulers, who do not hesitate to make a horrible example of anyone, including the President of the United States of America. From 1776, when Jeremy Bentham and William Petty, the Earl of Shelburne, fresh from the triumph of the French Revolution, which they planned and ran, were drafted by the British Crown to bring their combined experience to bear against the colonists, to 1812, when the British sacked and burned Washington, D.C., destroying secret documents that would have exposed the treason being worked against the young United States. Also to the Watergating of President Nixon and the assassination of President Kennedy. The hand of the Committee of 300 is clearly visible. This book is an attempt to open the eyes of the American people to this terrible truth. We are not an independent nation, nor can we ever be as long as we are ruled by an invisible government, the Committee of 300. Okay, so basically, he's saying that the invisible government, the secret rulers, is the Committee of 300, made up of all of those black nobility families. There are two Americas. One is the 19th century heavy industry-based society. The other is the growing post-industrial society, in some cases built on the shards of the old America. It is the crisis between these two worlds which will produce the economic and social catastrophe of the next decades. The two worlds are in fundamental opposition, and they cannot coexist. In the end, the post-industrial world must crush and obliterate the other one. Remember, this speech was made in 1981, and we can see from the state of our economy and our industries just how accurate was Sir Peter's prediction. When concerned people ask me how long the 1991 recession will last, I refer them to Sir Peter's statements, and I add my own opinion that it will not end until around 1995-1996. And even then, what emerges will not be the America we knew in the 1960s and the 1970s. I think we can all agree to that. That America has been destroyed. I reported Sir Peter's speech in my newsletter soon after it was delivered. How prophetic it was! But then it was easy to predict a future already written for America by the Committee of 300 and its executive Club of Rome. What was Sir Peter saying in a euphemistic manner? Translated into ordinary everyday English, he was saying that the old American way of life, our true and trusted Republican form of government, based upon our Constitution, was going to be crushed by the New World Order, as we knew it was going to have to go or be crushed to pieces. The Committee of 300 has planted its agents in the muscle and sinew of the United States, in its government, in its Congress, in the advisory posts around the President, as ambassadors and as secretaries of state, and the ambassadors and the secretaries of state. From time to time, the Club of Rome holds gatherings and conferences which, although they appear under innocuous titles, break up into action committees, each of which is assigned a specific task and a specific target date, by which time their assignments must be completed. If it does nothing else, the Committee of 300 is working to a very specific timetable. The first Club of Rome conference in the United States was called by the Committee of 300 in 1969 under the title The Association of the Club of Rome. The next meeting was held in 1970 under the title Riverdale Center of Religious Research, and was directed by Thomas Burney. Then followed the Woodlands Conference held in Houston, Texas, starting in 1971. Thereafter, regular conferences have been held at Woodlands every year. Then, to crown it all, the first global conference on the future was held in July of 1980, attended by 4,000 social engineers and members of think tanks, all of whom were members of or affiliated with various institutions operating under the Club of Rome umbrella organizations. It sounds a lot like what we're watching WHO, right? The World Health Organization and some of these other ones doing. Now, the Club of Rome feels confident that it has carried out its Committee of 300 mandate to soften up the United States. After 45 years of waging war on the people of this nation, who will doubt that it has indeed accomplished its task? Look around and see how we have been demoralized. Drugs, pornography, rock and roll music, free sex, the family unit, all but totally undermined, lesbianism and homosexuality, including now the transgender atrocities we're seeing. I added that part. And finally, the ghastly murder of millions of innocent babies by their own mothers. Has there ever been a crime so vile as mass abortion? And by the way, I should probably say, if you see anything in in the brackets, okay, that's me adding impertinent information, okay? The overwhelming rise of mindless violence, serial killers, teenage suicides, the unmistakable signs of lethargy, what is known as long-range penetration, is part of our new environment, as dangerous, if not more so, than the polluted air we breathe. Okay, now I found this document online. It's from the U.S. Department of Justice, from the FBI, dated August 1st, that's either 88 or 89. And then I've kind of blown up what I have in the red rectangle. It says, it's Dear Mr. Manganiello. a song recorded, so Mr. Manganiello, I believe, is like a record producer or owner of a record company. And the FBI is, Mr. Ulrich is writing to him. And he says, Dear Mr. Manganiello, a song recorded by the rap group NWA on their album entitled Straight Outta Compton encourages violence against and disrespect for the law enforcement officers and has been brought to my attention. I understand your company recorded and distributed this album, and I am writing to share my thoughts and concerns with you. Advocating violence and assault is wrong, and we in the law enforcement community take exception to such action. Violent crime, which is a major problem in our country, reached an unprecedented high in 1988. 78 law enforcement officers were feloniously slain in the line of duty during 1988, 4 more than in 1987. Law enforcement officers dedicate their lives to the protection of our citizens, and recordings such as the one from NWA are both discouraging and degrading to those brave, dedicated officers. Music plays a significant role in society, and I want you to be aware of the FBI's position relative to this song and its message. I believe my views reflect the opinion of the entire law enforcement community. And again, that was signed in, I believe, 1989. Okay. Now, let me come back here for a second. I want to talk with you because I always try to point out things in areas where we have been programmed, and this is one of those topics that I think we could all agree upon. We have been programmed for many, many years to distrust police officers. We've basically been shown images on TV of the bad cops or the bad police officers that have done something wrong, and that becomes the focus. And we see this through our mockingbird media over and over. And so what that tends to do is give an underlying message that all police officers are bad. Now, I think that the majority of you who follow this channel probably are smart enough to realize that that is programming. And are there bad police officers? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I would say that is a minority. By and large, we have amazing police officers that really do care about their communities, that care about protecting the citizens. But unfortunately, we only hear about the ones that go rogue or lose their temper or who step out of line. And we don't hear enough about the really good ones. And so I don't know why. I think it's because most of my HGTV shows are still kind of on hiatus right now, but I've gotten a little bit obsessed with watching YouTube videos regarding police officers arresting people. I think I can be a little bit gullible, and I think that I did not realize how many really crazy people are out there. Like, we have crazy on a level I've never seen before. Like, I'm 56. I've lived a few decades, but I'm seeing crazy on a level where it's kind of becoming the norm. And as I watch video after video after video of these various arrests, I'm really glad that the officers are required to wear body cams, because I feel like, number one, that holds them accountable. But number two, it also proves, it's proof as to how they deal with these different suspects that they're apprehending. But it is crazy to me. One common thing I've noticed among almost all of these people that get arrested is they're either drunk, so they're intoxicated, or they are high on marijuana or meth or a combination of all of the above. And I want to tell you that, I mean, I've probably watched 100 videos, no joke. I mean, I guess that's how I unwind, but it's kind of like, you know, when you're driving by and you're looking at an accident, like you don't really want to look at it, but you're almost compelled to look just to see what happened. It's like that. Like I said, there's just a level of crazy. But these officers, one thing I'm noticing is that they keep their composure, they keep their cool, they talk, and it doesn't matter. And we're talking arrests of every different kind of ethnicity that you can think of. And they stay respectful to the person, not abusive, but yet these people that are high on meth or marijuana or just drunk out of their minds, they bite them, they kick them, they scratch them, they call them the most vile, profane names that it's just like, it's crazy. And so I do want you guys to know that when we have to realize that not only have our schools been indoctrination centers, but our televisions are as well. And the Mockingbird media, if they have a certain narrative they want to put forth, they're going to show you what they want you to see. So I encourage you, go scouting on YouTube and just look for police arrests. I mean, you'll just be shocked at some of these people. But all that to say, I also was kind of looking at statistics to see about, you know, how many people actually do get shot by police. Like, I want to kind of look at the statistics. So let me come back over here to my slideshow. So these are examples from the year 2016, according to the Washington Post. Washington Post says that in 2016 in the United States, 963 people were killed by police, okay, in the United States. 465 were white, 233 were black, okay. So that's the white people are just about double the black people. 160 Hispanics were shot, 15 Asian, 16 Native American, and then there were 74 that were unknown what they were. Okay? Of the 963 people that were shot, out of those different categories, 517 of them had guns. 150 had a knife. 65 were in a vehicle, meaning they were trying to kill or trying to attack with a vehicle. The vehicle was their weapon. 44 of them had a toy weapon, which makes me think maybe they were trying to be suicided by police, right? Brandishing a weapon. And of course, if you're in a car and the police aren't close, all they see is a weapon. They don't, they see a gun. They don't know if it's real or not. And so the people end up getting shot because they are pointing this toy weapon at the police with the intention of being killed. 70 of the people had some other kind of instrument, so maybe like a pipe, a hammer, who knows what else. Only 48 of those 963 were unarmed, and then 69, it was not known whether they had something on them or not. So I want you to take a screenshot of these statistics. In 2016, 963 people were killed by police, and then so on the one screen that shows you the breakdown, way more white people, way more numbnut white people, right, misbehaving. And then to the right, you can see that out of 963 people, there were only 48 for sure that were unarmed. Okay, so that tells you that we're talking, most of the people being shot are thugs, are bad people. Okay. Now, here is a picture of a guy, of a young black man, holding a sign saying, "Am I next?" Right? They're at a protest for violence against blacks. Okay? Now, remember, let me go back here. 233 black people in 2016 out of the whole nation, the whole United States of America, in the year 2016, 233 black people were killed. Okay? 22 out of the 233 black people who were killed were unarmed. So that means 211 of those black persons had a weapon on them. So out of the whole United States in 2016, 22 out of the 233 black persons were unarmed. Okay? And we don't know the circumstances of the 22. That still, I know, seems high. But that means 211 of those persons who were killed were armed and had weapons on them. So black people have less people killed by the police compared to white people. Apparently there's more stupid white people doing stupid things. In fact, and here's more statistics I found when I was looking into different interviews, most black killings are perpetrated by other black people. I watched several interviews and discussions between black commentators, and they all agreed that, setting aside the police situation, most killings, non-police related, were black people being killed by bad black persons. Okay, I don't have the statistics for the other ethnicities. So, but my question to you, and why am I focusing on the blacks in general? Because we have most of the protests about this, right? I don't see a lot of Asian people standing out on street corners protesting for Asian lives, right? Or even the Native Americans. And the Native Americans, I think, by far have the worst situation because looking at the statistics, they have the highest rates of suicide. They have the highest rates of death, of alcoholism. Like, it's horrific what our government has done to the Native Americans, has done to all ethnicities. Okay, so but I'm going to ask you a question. Why do you suppose that we mostly only hear about the blacks that are killed by police? If you said mockingbird media propaganda, you would be correct. And so I just wanted to address the subject as we're going along, because this ties in exactly with the propaganda and what this Committee of 300 and all of its different tentacles are trying to do. They're trying to create race wars. Okay, now we have a lot of ethnicities, but why is it always the blacks versus the whites we hear about, right? I don't know. I don't know why we're focused on that, but they are trying to create race wars. They're trying to create bad feelings between these ethnicities. Okay, but here's the deal. There are bad people of every ethnicity. There's bad white people and there's good white people. There's bad blacks. There's really good good blacks. There's there's bad Native Americans and there's really good Native Americans. Same with the Asians and so on and so forth. So it's the bad versus the good is not tied to any one ethnicity. And we really, I mean, it's going to be hard enough fighting what the Committee of 300 is trying to do. Let's not fight each other. Okay? They want to keep us so embroiled with fighting each other that we don't come against them, is really what it's about. They're trying to divide and conquer humanity, and we cannot afford to buy into that. All right, moving on. The invisible government of the Committee of 300 has put tremendous pressure on America to change its ways for the worse. America is the last bastion of freedom, and unless our freedoms are taken away from us, progress towards a one-world government will be considerably slowed. Such an undertaking as a one-world government is a massive one, requiring a great deal of skill, organizing abilities, control of governments and their policies. The only organization that could possibly have undertaken this mammoth task with any hope of success is the Committee of 300, and we have just seen how far it has come towards total success. Above all, the battle is a spiritual one. Unfortunately, the Christian churches have become little more than social clubs run by the infinitely evil World Council of Churches, the WCC, whose beginnings lie not in Moscow, but in the city of London, as we can see from the chart at the end of this book, which is that yellow chart that shows all of the little tentacles. That's what he's referring to. Which gives the structure of the one world government church. This body, the World Council of Churches, was set up in the 1920s to serve as a vehicle for a one world government policies and stands as a monument to the long-range planning capabilities of the Committee of 300. The Club of Rome has succeeded in splitting the Christian churches. It has succeeded in building up an army of charismatic fundamentals and evangelicals. Do you remember what John Todd told us a couple of videos ago about why the charismatic movement was started? Right? During the Gulf War of Genocide, I received scores of letters, Dr. Coleman is saying this, asking me how I could oppose a just and Christian war against Iraq. He says, how could I doubt that Christian fundamentalist support for the Committee of 300's war against Iraq was not biblical? After all, didn't Billy Graham pray with President Bush Sr. just before the shooting started? Doesn't the Bible speak of wars and rumors of wars? These letters give an insight into just how well the Tavistock Institute has done its work. The Christian fundamentalists will be a formidable force behind the State of Israel. Again, this is what a lot of what World War III is about. Remember that Islam and the Muslim Arab nations and the State of Israel are going to annihilate one another, right? That's the goal. And then Christianity is going to be, they want Christianity completely crushed so that atheism comes about, which will create a spiritual vacuum, so then they can then introduce their god Lucifer to everyone. Okay, and then their King David, the Antichrist, will then come sit on their throne. That is the layout for World War III, according to Albert Pike's letter. So the Christian fundamentalists will be a formidable force behind the State of Israel, exactly as planned. How sad that these fine people do not realize that they have been grossly misused by the Club of Rome, and that their opinions and beliefs are not their own, but those created for them by the hundreds of Committee of 300 think tanks that dot the American landscape. In other words, like any other segment of the United States population, the Christian fundamentalists and evangelicals have been thoroughly brainwashed. Okay, so I want to repeat that one phrase. He says, above all, the battle is a spiritual one. Unfortunately, the Christian churches have become little more than social clubs. I would say now they're New Age social clubs. The New Age is completely infiltrated. And they're being run by the infinitely evil World Council of Churches, whose beginnings lie not in Moscow, but in the city of London. Okay, so he says this body was set up in the 1920s to serve as a vehicle for the one world government policies. And so this is their logo from their website, the National Council of Churches. And Billy Graham was really their front guy for this. And I hate to tell you, I'm going to burst some bubbles here, but Billy Graham was part of the system. He was basically discovered by, the name is escaping me at the moment. I'm going to end up doing a whole other video on the Christian church and all of these things, and so I'll cover that in more detail. But he basically was discovered and financed to go on and hold these crusades and do that. Like, as a matter of fact, there have been several survivors that are adults now, but as children, they were taken to Bohemian Grove for their gatherings. And one survivor by the name of Fiona Barnett talks about what Billy Graham did to her during that time. I also found it, and I have other proofs as well, he was also a Freemason. And I find it interesting. I was reading an article, an article from Ruth Graham, Billy's wife, from many years ago. And she had been overheard talking to a friend how strange she thought it was that Billy slept with his eyes open. It kind of creeped her out a little bit. And one thing I will say about that is that's usually a pretty good indication of mind control programming, because they do that as they program alters into the different people. And so that doesn't surprise me. But he was not a good guy. He was part of the system, and he, like all of the other megachurch pastors and those high-level names, they all are part of this agenda. So here is a chart, and I think I got this from, there's another YouTube gal I really, really like. Her channel is called Probably Alexandra, and she put this together. So you can see at the top is the G, or that's, Gnostic, Gnosis, Lucifer. And then under that you've got Kabbalah, then the Freemasons, and then there's four main groups that come off the Freemasons, and one of those is the church. Okay, and so you've got, under church, you've got Billy Graham, and you've got Darby and Schofield, and dispensationalism, which came about from Darby and Schofield, mainly Darby, and then you've got the mega churches. So this is another one you might want to take a screenshot of. Okay, continuing, Dr. Coleman says, I quote the profound statement made by the prophet Hosea, which is found in the Christian Bible. My people perish for lack of knowledge. Some may already have heard my expose of the foreign aid scandal, in which work I named several conspiratorial organizations, whose number is legion. Their final objective was to overthrow the U.S. Constitution and the merging of this country, which had been chosen by God as his country, with a godless one world new world order government, which will return the world to conditions far worse than existed in the Dark Ages. Let us talk about actual case histories, he says. The attempt to communize and deindustrialize Italy. The Committee of 300 long ago decreed that there shall be a smaller, much smaller, and better world. That is, their idea of what constitutes a better world. The myriads of useless eaters consuming scarce natural resources were to be culled. That means unalived. Industrial progress supports population growth. Therefore, the command to multiply and subdue the earth found in Genesis had to be subverted. The Committee of 300 ordered the Club of Rome to use Polish nationalism as a tool to destroy the Catholic Church and to pave the way for Russian troops to reoccupy the country. The Solidarity movement was a creation of the Committee of 300. Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was the author of the Technotronics we talked about last week, who chose the name for the trade union and selected its office holders and organizers. Most of the Solidarity leaders were descendants of Bolshevik Jews from Odessa and were not noted for hating communism. This helps to understand the saturation coverage provided by the American news media. Professor Sachs has taken the process a step further, ensuring economic slavery for a Poland that was recently freed from the domination of the USSR. Poland will now become the economic slave of the United States. Italy was chosen as a test target by the Committee of 300. Italy is important to the conspirators' plans because it is the closest European country to the Middle East, linked to Middle East economics and politics. It is also the home of the Catholic Church, which Adam Weishaupt ordered destroyed, and home for some of Europe's most powerful top oligarchical families of the ancient black nobility. Should Italy have been weakened by Moro's death, it would have had repercussions in the Middle East, which would have weakened U.S. influence in the region. Italy is important for another reason. It is a gateway for drugs entering Europe from Iran and Lebanon, and we shall return to that subject in due course. Various groups had combined under the name socialism to bring about the downfall of several Italian governments since the Club of Rome was established in 1968. Among these are the Black Nobility of Venice and Genoa, P2 Masonry, and the Red Brigades, all working for the same goals. Police investigators in Rome working on the Red Brigades Aldo Moro case came across the names of several very prominent Italian families working closely with this terrorist group. The police also discovered evidence that in at least a dozen cases, these powerful and prominent families had allowed their homes and or their property to be used as safe houses for Red Brigade cells. Henry Kissinger was then and still is an important agent in the service of the Royal Institute for International Affairs. He's also a member of the Club of Rome and the Council on Foreign Relations. Kissinger's role in destabilizing the United States by means of 3 wars, well, I'm going to back up a minute. I'm going to let you know, yes, he is also a Jew, okay, a Kabbalistic one. Kissinger's role in destabilizing the United States by means of 3 wars, the Middle East War, the Korean War, and Vietnam War, is well known, as is his role in the Gulf War, in which the U.S. Army acted as mercenaries for the Committee of 300 in bringing Kuwait back under its control and at the same time making an example out of Iraq so that other small nations would not be tempted to try to work out their own destiny. Kissinger, so it sounds like the leader of Kuwait didn't want to go along with the plan, so they made an example of him. Henry Kissinger also threatened the late Ali Bhutto, president of the sovereign nation of Pakistan. Bhutto's crime was that he favored nuclear weapons for his country. As a Muslim state, Pakistan felt threatened by continued Israeli aggression in the Middle East. Bhutto was judiciously murdered in 1979 by the CFR representative in the country, General Zia-ul-Haq. In his planned ascent to power, ul-Haq encouraged a frenzied mob to set fire to the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad in an apparent attempt to show the CFR that he was his own man and to secure more foreign aid. And it was later learned to murder Richard Helms. Okay, so I just wanted to put this in here. I found 2 quotes from Kissinger. It tells you what a great guy he is. Kissinger quote from a speech to the WHO, which is the World Health Organization Council, on eugenics, February 25th, 2009. He says, "Control sheep minds and you control the herd. Vaccine makers," now this is 2009, listen, "vaccine makers stand to make billions, and many of you in this room are investors. It's a big win-win. We thin out the herd, and the herd pays us for extermination services." He also was quoted from that same WHO Council meeting on eugenics, 2009. He says, "Once the herd accepts mandatory vaccinations, it's game over. They will accept anything. Forcible blood or organ donation for the greater good. We can genetically modify children and sterilize them for the greater good." Yep, that's him. Okay. Dr. Coleman says, several years later, ul-Haq paid with his life for intervening in the war raging in Afghanistan. His C-130 Hercules aircraft was hit by an ELF, which stands for electric allow frequency, shot shortly after it took off, causing the aircraft to loop into the ground. In my 1989 work, Terror in the Skies, I gave the following account of what happened. Shortly before ul-Haq's C-130 took off from a Pakistan military base, a suspicious-looking truck was seen close to the hangar that had housed the C-130. The control tower warned base security, but by the time action was taken, the C-130 was already airborne and the truck had gone. A few minutes later, the plane began looping the loop until it hit the ground and exploded in a ball of fire. There is no explanation for such behavior by the C-130, an aircraft with a marvelously reliable record, and a joint Pakistani-United States Board of Inquiry found that there was no pilot error or mechanical or structural failure. Looping the loop is a recognized trademark of an aircraft hit by an ELF fire. In addition, the information was confirmed by 2 intelligence sources, or he says by 2 of my intelligence sources. I received some useful information from a Soviet scientific paper on these subjects, published in England under the title Soviet Radio Electronics and Communication Systems. There was no doubt in my mind that General ul-Haq had been murdered. The truck seen near the C-130 hangar undoubtedly carried a mobile ELF device of the type that the Soviet armed forces are known to possess. What Kissinger was doing when he threatened Bhutto was not official U.S. policy, but the policy of the modern-day Illuminati. One needs to have a clear understanding of just why it is that nuclear power is so hated all over the world, and why the fake environmentalist movement, established and financially supported by the Club of Rome, was called upon to wage war on nuclear energy. With nuclear energy generating electricity in cheap and abundant supplies, third world countries would gradually become independent of U.S. foreign aid and begin to assert their sovereignty. Nuclear-generated electricity is the key to bringing third world countries out of their backward state. a state which the Committee of 300 has ordered to remain in position. So he's saying that these third world countries are purposely have been made into third world countries and being kept there. Less foreign aid means less control of a country's natural resources by the IMF, which is the International Money Fund. It wasn't his idea of developing nations taking charge of their destiny that was an anathema to the Club of Rome and its ruling Committee of 300. We have seen oppositions to nuclear power in the United States successfully used to block industrial development in conformity with the club's post-industrial zero-growth plans. Dependence upon U.S. foreign aid actually keeps foreign countries in servitude to the Council on Foreign Relations. The people of the recipient countries receive very little of the money, as it usually ends up in the pockets of the government leaders who allow the natural raw material assets of the country to be savagely stripped by the IMF. Mugabe of Zimbabwe, formerly known as Rhodesia, is a good example of how raw material assets, in this case high-grade chrome ore, is controlled through foreign aid. Lonrho, the giant conglomerate run by Angus Ogilvy, an important member of the Committee of 300 on behalf of his cousin, Queen Elizabeth II, now has total control of this valuable resource while the people of the country sink ever deeper into poverty and misery, notwithstanding a handout of in excess of $300 million from the United States. Mugabe received enough foreign aid from the U.S. in the region of $300 million per year, per annum, to enable him to build 3 hotels on the French Côte d'Azur, Cape Ferrat, and Monte Carlo, while his citizens grapple with disease, unemployment, and malnutrition, not to mention an iron-fisted dictatorship that allows no complaints. Thus, it is clear that foreign aid is a powerful means of exercising control of countries such as Zimbabwe and indeed all African countries. In regard to the third world countries, the Club of Rome's Harland Cleveland prepared a report which was the height of cynicism. At the time, Cleveland was U.S. ambassador to NATO. Essentially, the paper said, quote, "It would be up to the third world nations to decide among themselves which populations should be eliminated." So basically, let's let the third world nations decide how to unalive their people and to participate in the eugenics plan. As Pecky later wrote based on the Cleveland report, he says, quote, "Damaged by conflicting policies of 3 major countries and blocs, roughly patched up here and there, the existing international economic order is visibly coming apart at the seams. The prospect of the necessity of the recourse is to triage, deciding who must be saved. It's a very grim one indeed, but if lamentably events should come to such a pass, the right to make such decisions cannot be left to just a few nations, because it would lend themselves to ominous power over life of the world's hungry. In this is found the committee policy of deliberately starving African nations to death, as evidenced in the sub-Saharan nations. This was cynicism at its worst, because the Committee of 300 had already abrogated the decisions of life and death unto itself, and Pecky knew. He knew it. He had previously so indicated in his book, Limits of Growth. Pecky completely dismissed industrial and agricultural progress, and in its place demanded that the world come under one coordinating council, to wit, the Club of Rome and its NATO institutions, in a one-world government. Foreign aid, also keeps U.S. citizens in a state of involuntary servitude and therefore less able to mount meaningful opposition to the government. David Rockefeller Jr. knew what he was doing when his Foreign Aid Bill became law in 1946. It has since then become one of the most hated laws on the statute books, following public exposure of what it is a racket run by government and paid for by we, the people. How can the conspirators maintain their grip upon the world, and more especially their chokehold over the U.S. and Britain? One of the most asked questions is, how can any single entity know at all times what is going on and how is control exercised? So this book will attempt to answer these and other questions. The only way we can come to grips with the reality of the conspirator success is by mentioning and discussing the secret societies, the front organizations, the government agencies, the banks, insurance companies, international business, the petroleum industry, and the hundreds of thousands of entities and foundations whose leading lights make up the membership of the Committee of 300, the ultimate control body that runs the world and has done so for at least 100 years. The Club of Rome, after playing a key role in the Cuban Missile Crisis, attempted to sell its crisis management system, the forerunner of FEMA, program to President Kennedy. Several Tavistock scientists went to see the president to explain what it meant, but the president rejected the advice they gave. The same year that Kennedy was murdered, Tavistock was back in Washington to talk with NASA. This time the talks were successful. Tavistock was given a contract by NASA to evaluate the effect of its coming space program on American public opinion. The contract was farmed to the Stanford Research Institute and the Rand Corporation. Much of the material produced by Tavistock, Stanford, and Rand never saw the light of day and remained sealed until now. Several Senate oversight committees and subcommittees I approached to obtain information told me they had never heard of it, nor did they have the slightest idea where I might find what I was seeking. Such is the power and prestige of the Committee of 300. In the case of President John F. Kennedy, the assassination was carried out with great attendant publicity and with the utmost brutality in order to serve as a warning to other world leaders to not get out of line. Pope John Paul I was quietly murdered because he was getting too close to the Committee of 300 through Freemasons in the Vatican hierarchy. His successor, Pope John Paul II, was publicly humiliated as a warning to cease and desist, which he did. As we shall see, certain Vatican leaders are today seated on the Committee of 300. At the same time, the capacity to assert social and political control over the individual will vastly increase. It will soon be possible to assert almost continuous control over every citizen and to maintain up-to-date files, containing even the most personal details about health and personal behavior of every citizen, in addition to the more customary data. We are already under intense strains through surveillance. Lourdes in Cuba is one place where this is happening. The other is NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, where a giant computer designated 666 can store data of every type mentioned by Zbigniew Brzezinski, plus possessing an expanded capacity to take in data for several billions more people than presently exist, if it ever comes to that, but which, in the light of the Global 2000 genocidal report, will probably never need to be utilized. Retrieval of data will be simple in the United States, where Brzezinski and his committee of 300 colleagues could simply add Social Security and/or driver's license numbers to 666 to provide the surveillance recording announced. Now, I went looking. I remembered something from a few years ago. So went and investigated. Sweden has a high adoption rate of voluntary, self-funded microchip implants for convenience, such as replacing keys, ID cards, and payment methods. Thousands of Swedes use these rice-sized chips for tasks like paying for public transport, unlocking doors, and storing medical information. The technology uses near-field communication for close-range interaction with scanners and is entirely voluntary. So you can see underneath that where it says Tech Times Post. In Sweden, more than 4,000 people have already chosen to have rice-sized microchips implanted under their skin, allowing them to skip keys, cards, and even train tickets. A simple hand wave can unlock doors, access gyms, validate travel, or even share contact details instantly. The chips, pioneered by companies like Biohacks International, are passive RFID devices that require no batteries, making them discreet and long-lasting. In a nation already famous for its digital-first and cashless culture, this body hacking movement has found widespread acceptance. Supporters see it as convenient at its best. But not everyone is convinced. Security experts raise questions about data protection, hacking risks, and potential misuse. Health researchers also caution about long-term impacts that remain understudied. Okay, but that looks like from the diagram or the picture you can see where they're having it placed. And then, of course, we have Mr. Musk, right? Mr. Technotronic himself with his Neuralink chip. So it's probably not going to be many more years before it goes, in my opinion, it goes from being voluntary, because we know from what Scripture says that near the end, you will not be able to buy or sell if you do not have their mark. So at this point, it's voluntary, but the day will come, because Scripture tells us that that it will not be voluntary. It will be forced, and again, you will either not be able to buy or sell, or possibly we could even be killed for that. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval by the authorities. Power will gravitate into the hands of those who control information. Our existing institutions will be supplanted by pre-crisis management institutions, the task of which will be to identify in advance likely social crises and to develop programs to cope with them. This describes the structure of FEMA, which we see in our day. This will encourage tendencies through the next several decades towards a technotronic era, a dictatorship, leaving even less room for political procedures as we know them. Finally, looking ahead to the end of the century, the possibility of biochemical mind control and genetic tinkering with man, including beings which will function like men and reason like them as well, could give rise to some difficult questions. The Committee of 300 corporations, banks, and insurance companies operate under the unified command covering every conceivable manner of strategy and cohesive action. The committee is the only organized power hierarchy in the world, transcending all governments and individuals, however powerful and secure they may feel themselves to be. This covers finance, defense matters, and political parties of all colors and types. There is no entity the committee cannot reach and control, and that includes organized religions of the world. This then is the all-powerful Olympian Group, whose power base is in London and the City of London's financial centers, with its grip on minerals, metals, and precious gems, cocaine, opium, and pharmaceutical drugs. Rentier financier bankers, cult promoters, and founders of rock music. The British Crown is the control point from which all things radiate. As the saying goes, they have a finger in every pie. Now, I did not include any of the slides to this, but I will again link Dr. Coleman's online book in the video description. He goes deep dive down into the opium trade in China and how that came to be. And yep, that is a product of the British East India Company. And there's so much more information in there. So if you are intrigued by all of this, I suggest that you go get the link from the video description and you can read it for yourself for free. The Tavistock Institute at Sussex University and London sites is owned and controlled by the Royal Institute for International Affairs, whose Hofjuden in America is Henry Kissinger. Surprise, surprise. The Eagle Star Group, which changed its name to the Star Group after the close of the Second World War, is composed of a group of major international companies involved in overlapping and interfaced areas. Number 1, insurance. 2, banking. 3, real estate. 4, entertainment. And 5, high technology, including cybernetics, electronic communications, etc. Banking, while not the mainstay, is vitally important, especially in the areas where banks act as clearinghouses and money launderers of drug money. The main big-name banks are the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve Banks, the Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank, and the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. American Express Bank is a means of recycling drug dollars, aka money laundering. Each of these banks is affiliated with and/or controls hundreds of thousands of large and small banks throughout the world. Banks, large and small, in the thousands, are in the Committee of the 300 Network, including Banca Commerciale d'Italia, Banca Privata, Banco Ambrosiano, the Netherlands Bank, Barclays Bank, Banco del Colombia, Banco de Ibero-America. Of special interest is Banca della Svizzera Italiana, BSI, since it handles flight capital investments to and from the United States, primarily in dollars and U.S. bonds, located and isolated in neutral Lugano, the flight capital center for the Venetian black nobility. Lugano is not in Italy or in Switzerland and is in a kind of a twilight zone for shady flight capital operations. George Ball, who owns a large block of stock in BSI, is a prominent insider and the bank's U.S. representative. BCCI, BNI, Banco Mercantil de Mexico, Banco Nacional de Panama, Bangkok Metropolitan Bank, Bank Lumi, Bank Hapoalim, Standard Bank, Bank of Geneva, Bank of Ireland, Bank of Scotland, Bank of Montreal, Bank of Nova Scotia, Banque Paris et Pays Bas, British Bank of the Middle East, and the Royal Bank of Canada, to name but a very small number in a huge list of specialty banks. And here's a diagram I found of just some of those. The Oppenheimers of South America, says Dr. Coleman, are much bigger heavyweights than the Rockefellers. For instance, in 1981, Harry Oppenheimer, chairman of the giant Anglo-American corporation that controls gold and diamond mining, sales and distribution in the world, stated that he was about to launch into the North American banking market. Oppenheimer promptly invested $10 billion in a specially created vehicle for the purpose of buying into big banks in the U.S., among which was Citicorp. Oppenheimer's investment vehicle was called Minorco, which set up shop in Bermuda, a British royal family preserve. On the board of Minorco was to be found Walter Wriston of Citicorp and Robert Clare, its chief counsel. I will also tell you the Oppenheimers go way back to the Rothschilds, to Mayor Amschel Rothschild, for example. Mayor Amschel got his first banking job, with Oppenheimer. So, there's a long history there. The International Court of Justice at The Hague, or The Hague, will be used in increasing measure in the next 2 years to settle legal arguments of all types. It is, of course, the prototype for a one world government legal system. So this is going to be apparently like the one world court that will supplant all the others. As for central banks, essential in the planning of the new world order, this is already very much a fait accompli, with the Bank of International Settlements dominating the scene at the close of 1991. Private banks are fast disappearing in preparation for the big 10 banks that will control banking the world over under the guidance of BIS and the IMF. And I think we probably are already seeing that now. I mean, I can think of Bank of America, US Bank, Wells Fargo, I'm not sure. Those might not even be, there might be something above the top, the tier 1 banks. So anyway, welfare states abound in Europe, and the United States is fast becoming the largest welfare state in the world. I can believe that. Once people come to depend on government for their subsistence, it will be very hard to wean them away from it. So I would just like to make a little comment here that if you are getting any type of government assistance, now would probably be, and you're concerned about anything I've gone over so far, now might be a very good time to start trying to wean yourself off of that and find other ways, because it's going to come back to get you in a few years. Like if you're not a good citizen and if you do not comply, you will be completely cut off, is my guess. Insurance companies play a key role in the business of the Committee of 300. Among these are found such top insurance companies as the Assicurazioni Generali of Venice and the Riunioni Adriatica de Securita. Sorry, I've mutilated those. The largest and second largest insurance companies in the world, who keep their bank accounts at the Bank of International Settlements in Swiss gold francs. Both control a multiplicity of investment banks whose turnover in stocks on Wall Street double that of U.S. investors. Prominent on the board of these two insurance giants are the Committee of 300 members, the Giustiniani family, which is a black nobility family of Rome and Venice, who trace their lineage to the Emperor Justinian, and Sir Jocelyn Hambro of the Hambros Merchant Bank, Pier Paolo Luzzati Fequis, whose lineage dates back 6 centuries to the most ancient Luzzatos, the black nobility of Venice, and Umberto Ortolani of the ancient black nobility family of the same name. Other old Venetian black nobility committee of 300 members and board members of ASG and RAS are the Doria family, who are the financiers of the Spanish Habsburgs, Elie de Rothschild of the French Rothschild family, Baron August von Fink being the second richest man in Germany and is now deceased, Franco Orsini Bonacassi of the ancient Orsini black nobility that traces its lineage to an ancient Roman senator of the same name, the Alba family whose lineage dates back to the great Duke of Alba, and Baron Pierre Lambert, a cousin of the Belgian Rothschild family. The English companies controlled by the British royal family are Eagle Star, Prudential Assurance Company, the Prudential Insurance Company, which own and control most American insurers, including Allstate Insurance. At the head of the list is Eagle Star, probably the most powerful front for military intelligence department 6, or what we call MI6. Eagle Star, although nowhere near as large as the Assicurazioni Generale, is perhaps equally important simply because it is owned by members of the Queen of England's family, and as titular head of the Committee of 300, Eagle Star makes a tremendous impact. Eagle Star is more than just a major front for MI6. It is also a front for major British banks, including Hill Samuels, Nathan M. Rothschild and Sons, and in parentheses he says, one of the gold price fixers who meet daily in London, and Barclays Bank, one of the funders of the African National Congress, ANC. It can be said with a great degree of accuracy that the most powerful British oligarchical families created Eagle Star as a vehicle for black operations against those who oppose Committee of 300 policies. Now, the Research Analysis Corporation. This is Humro's sister, the 1984 organization situated in McLean, Virginia. Established in 1948, it was taken over by the Committee of 300 in 1961 when it became part of the Johns Hopkins block. It has worked on over 600 projects, including integrating Negroes into the Army. Aren't you so happy for that? The tactical use of nuclear weapons, psychological warfare programs, and mass population control. Obviously, there are many more think tanks, and we shall come to most of them in this book. One of the most important areas of cooperation between what think tanks turn out and what becomes government and public policy are the pollsters. You know what, I want to go back here for a second because I just thought of something. So I'm not sure why they were working on integrating Negroes into the Army, but let's not forget, we also had the Choctaw code talkers and the Dene, or what we call the Navajo code talkers. They don't call themselves Navajo. They refer to themselves as the Dene people. But we had those being used during the various wars as well. So he says, it is the job of the polling companies. Well, wait, hold on. Obviously, there are many more major think tanks that we shall come to. One of the most important areas of cooperation between what think tanks turn out and what becomes government and public policy are the pollsters. It is the job of the polling companies to mold and shape public opinion in the way that suits the conspirators. They make it seem like it's us, but they're basically forming how we think about things. Polls are constantly being taken by CBS, NBC, ABC, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. Most of these efforts are coordinated as the National Opinion Research Center, where, as much as it will amaze most of us, a psychological profile was developed for the entire nation. Findings are fed into the computers of the Gallup poll and Yankelovich, Skelly, and White for comparative evaluation. Much of what we read in our newspapers or see on television has first been cleared by the polling companies. What we see is what the pollsters think we should see, and this is called public opinion making. Kind of like, I think of the term Jedi mind tricking, right? The whole idea behind this bit of social conditioning is to find out how responsive the public is to policy directives handed down by the Committee of 300. We are called targeted population groups, and what is measured by the pollsters is how much resistance is generated to what appears in the nightly news. Later, we shall learn exactly how this deceptive practice got started and who is responsible for it. It is all part of the elaborate opinion-making process created at Tavistock. Today, our people believe they are well informed, but what they do not realize is that the opinions they believe that are their own were in fact created in the research institutions and think tanks of America, and that none of us are free to form our own opinions because of the information we are provided with by the media and the pollsters. All three major television networks came as spin-offs from RCA, especially the National Broadcasting Company, which is NBC, which was first closely followed by the American Broadcasting Company, ABC, in 1951. The third big television network was Columbia Broadcasting Systems, with CBS, which, like its two sister companies, was and still is dominated by British intelligence. William Paley was trained in mass brainwashing techniques at the Tavistock Institute prior to being passed as a qualified head to CBS. Thus, if we the people of the United States but knew that all of our major television networks are subject to British oversight, and information they provide first goes to London for clearance. It is interesting to know that the Tavistock intelligence paper written by Stanford Research Institute, commonly named the Aquarian Conspiracy, was funded by donations from all three major television networks. Now, polling was brought to a fine art just before the United States entered the Second World War. Americans, unbeknownst to themselves, were conditioned to look upon Germany and Japan as dangerous enemies who had to be stopped. Just recently, we saw how well Tavistock's conditioning process works when Americans were conditioned to perceive Iraq as a threat and Saddam Hussein as a personal enemy of the United States. Such a conditioning process is technically described as the message reaching the sense organs of the persons to be influenced. One of the most respected of all pollsters is Committee of 300 member Daniel Yankelovich of the company Yankelovich, Skelly, and White. Yankelovich is proud to tell his students that polling is a tool to change public opinion, although this is not original. Yankelovich, having drawn his inspiration from David Nisbet's book, Trend Report, which was commissioned by the Club of Rome. You're beginning to kind of see that all roads lead back to the Club of Rome and even behind them to the Committee of 300. Like, the more I was researching these, it's like we are actually in the Truman Show. We are all of us Truman. And everything about our lives that we think we have choice over, or the decisions we make, things we watch, ideas, for the most part, unless you've completely cut off all of the news media and don't read the newspapers and all the social media stuff, like, we all have had most of our existence is a show, right? Everything's been created for us. So, and here's just a little picture that I grabbed off the internet. What a new poll shows about where Americans think the country is headed by the Associated Press, right? So don't buy into those polls. Don't believe what they say, because it's all jerry-rigged. It's not real. Now, there is not one politician in Washington, D.C. who is not somehow beholden to it. The left cries against it, calling it imperialism, which indeed it is, but the left is run by the same people, the very same ones who control the right, so that the left is no more freer than we are. It's no more freer than the right. So it's controlled opposition, right? Republican versus Democrat, conservative versus liberal, black versus white, male versus female. It's the picture there. It's the illusion. All of the conservative people are fed what they need to believe for their illusion. Same with the right. And whoever doesn't, thinks differently than you is the enemy. But it doesn't matter which road you take. They both lead to the slaughterhouse. Their slaughterhouse. This is how the Tavistock Institute and Willis Harman programmed us to react. Dismantling of our ideals goes on without protest. The spiritual and intellectual drive of our people has been destroyed. On May 27, 1991, President George H.W. Bush Sr. made a very profound statement, the thrust of which appears to have been totally misused by most political commentators. He said, "The moral dimension of American policy requires us to chart a moral course through a world of lesser evils. That is the real world, not black and white, very few moral absolutes." Well, what else could we expect from a president who is most probably the most evil man ever to occupy the White House? We've had a few more of those since him. Consider this in light of Bush's order to the military to bury alive 12,000 Iraqi soldiers. I'm going to repeat that. Bush Sr. ordered the military to bury alive 12,000 Iraqi soldiers. Consider this in the light of Bush Sr.'s ongoing war of genocide against the Iraqi people. And then his son continued that program. President Bush Sr. was delighted to characterize President Saddam Hussein as the Hitler of our times. He never bothered to offer a single scrap of proof, though. It was not needed because President Bush made the statement, "We accepted it without question. Consider this in the bright light of truth, that he did all of these things, quote unquote, in the name of the American people, while secretly taking his orders from the Committee of 300. And I'm pretty sure most of you here also know that it was Bush Sr. who ordered 9/11. 9/11 was what we call a false flag event. And who did they blame it on? They blamed it on the Arab Muslims, right? I forget what specific group, but they blamed it on the Arab Muslims. But yeah, in fact, and there is so much proof out there right now, so much proof. If you can't believe this or you aren't aware of that, you need to go do some digging, because it is 100% fact that Bush Sr. ordered 9/11, and Dick Cheney was on board with it as well. He was right in there with his as his sidekick. And we already know what happened with 9/11. If he wasn't already deceased, he and others that have done these things should be before a tribunal for war crimes. He unalived American citizens on American soil from his position. That is reprehensible. But this is what these people do. They don't care. For them, I'm sure that those Committee of 300 members were clinking glasses and having a little party to celebrate however many less useless eaters were gone. It's just so demonic. But more than anything else, consider this. President George H.W. Bush and his controllers feel so secure that they no longer deem it necessary to hide their evil control of the American people or to lie about it. This is self-evident in the statement that he, as our leader, will make all manner of compromises with truth, honesty, and decency, if his controllers and ours deem it necessary. Okay, on May 27th, 1991, the President of the United States abandoned each and every principle embodied in our Constitution and boldly proclaimed that he was no longer bound by it. With President Bush Sr. and his no absolute morals guiding us, we blunder ahead as lost nations and individuals tend to do. We are collaborating unknowingly with the Committee of 300 for our own downfall and our own enslavement. Some sense it and feel a strong sense of unease. The various conspiracy theories that are familiar with do not seem to cover it all. And this is because they know nothing of the Conspirators Hierarchy, the Committee of 300. The Carter administration accelerated the collapse of our economy and our military strength, the latter begun by the Club of Rome and Lucius Trust member Robert Strange McNamara. In spite of his promises, Reagan continued to undermine our industrial base, starting where Carter left off. While we need to keep our defenses strong, we cannot do that from a weak industrial base, for without a well-run military industrial complex, we cannot have a viable defense system. The Committee of 300 recognizes this and planned in 1953 its zero-growth post-industrial policies, now in full flower. Thanks to the Club of Rome, our technology potential has dropped below that of Japan and Germany, nations we are supposed to have defeated in the Second World War. How has this come about? Now, talking about Lucius Trust, okay, this is what Wikipedia had to say. And then I added my little blue box. But it says, the Lucius Trust, formerly known as Lucifer Publishing Company, is a nonprofit service organization incorporated in the United States in 1922. Seems the 1920s was a very busy decade. By Alice Bailey and her husband Foster Bailey, to act as a fiduciary trust for the publishing of 24 books of esoteric occult philosophy published under the Alice Bailey's name, and to fund and administer activities concerned with the establishment of right human relations. Okay, these include the Arcane School, a school for esoteric training. It says, the objective of the Lucius Trust, as stated in its charter, are to encourage the study of comparative religion, philosophy, science, and art, to encourage every line of thought tending to the broadening of the human sympathies and interests, and the expansion of ethical, religious, and educational literature. Okay, so it's basically to destroy Christianity and the Bible. So the Lucius Trust Publishing Company was founded in the early 1920s, again, as the Lucifer Publishing Company. And it says the name has been attributed to the Bailey study of theosophical teachings that Lucifer, the archangel, since when was Lucifer an archangel, brought intelligence to mankind. The name was changed in 1925 to the Lucius Publishing Company. It has headquarters in New York City, London, and Geneva, Switzerland. The trust is established in Great Britain under the title Lucius Trust Ltd. or Limited. In Switzerland, it's Lucius Trust Association, and in the Netherlands, it's the Lucius Trust Stichting. It says the Lucius Trust runs a blog, World Goodwill, which focuses on defining new sustainable development goals for humanity. Guys, anytime you hear the word sustainable development goals, that's code word for eugenics. Okay? Code word for eugenics. All of these organizations are going into all the third world countries and implementing their sustainable development goals, right? Now, here's what I found interesting. Jared Kushner, son-in-law of President Trump, owns, or I don't know if he still owns it, but he owned a 42-story building on Fifth Avenue in New York. The address was 666 Fifth Avenue. Lucent Technologies' main office is also at 666 Fifth Avenue in New York City. Lucent Technologies is the source for the new and the improved RFID chip. Wow, such a coincidence. Lucent Technologies' sister company is called Lucifer Manufacturing. Jared Kushner and his family are very close friends to Prime Minister Netanyahu. They're all enmeshed. Kind of like how the Vatican, on top of Mount Graham, has their big Lucifer telescope. So, wonder what they're looking for. Now, to the left here, this picture of the woman, this is Alice Bailey in her later years. And I kind of made bigger the hand that she has across her chest. And to the right is Pat Robertson of the 700 Club. Okay. Now you'll notice they are making the same hand gesture. The right arm over to the left, right? With kind of a claw. Well, in Freemasonry, this is known as the lion's paw grip. During the third section of the Master Mason degree, we are introduced to the Hiramic legend. The candidate, representing Hiram Abiff, is raised from his makeshift grave by the help of the strong grip of a Master Mason, or the lion's paw. Well, what is the meaning of the lion's paw, and when and why was it placed into the ritual? To understand why they used the term lion's paw, we need to examine one of the overarching themes of the third degree. The Hiramic legend is a story of rebirth. It's a story of the resurrection of Hiram Abiff, as well as the candidate himself. The candidate symbolically dies to his past, the life of the profane, not knowing light, and he is reborn into further light in Masonry. He puts his past life behind him and is now a seeker of enlightenment and moral rectitude. So not only is she into esoteric and occult theosophy, she was, she either studied under or was under Blavatsky's teachings, right? But she's also a Freemason. So she and the woman before her, Claire Prophet, I think her name was Claire something Prophet. They started what is known as co-Masonry, which allowed women to be part of Freemasonry. So yes, sorry, another spoiler alert. Pat Robertson of the 700 Club, yep, he's part of the system too. And I won't totally crush you by telling you the things I have found out about him, but yep. So the signs and symbols. And we will do another video. I promised. I know my list of needed videos is growing each week, but we're going to go over all the signs and symbols so that when you see things like this, and you're out and about and see things, that you will know exactly what they mean. We will know them by their signs and symbols. I'm so thankful. I have no idea if Dr. John Coleman is still alive or not, but I don't know if he has grown children or grandchildren. I don't know if they'll ever see this video, but thank you with all of my heart to Dr. John Coleman and his family for all of the risks that he and all of you took to get this information out to us. And it really is important that every generation picks up the baton of information and carries it forward, so that, because all it takes is one generation to let this information fall through the cracks and get buried. So thank you, Dr. John Coleman and family, for all of this information to better help all of us know how to position ourselves and know what to expect so that we can not just roll over and comply. So anyway, all that being said, I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope you have found this information helpful. Hopefully, again, I don't want to scare anybody, but half the battle is knowing what to expect. And so let's pray. Let's ask for discernment and wisdom on what to do for ourselves and our families. Let's not comply. Let's not roll over. Let's say no to these things. Anyway, thank you all. And I pray you have a blessed week, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.